Yeah. And Frank, you know that Jess is coming in to do the song first before we start properly. Yeah?
Yeah.
Don't forget.
Okay, it's right on 7 o'clock. Shall we make a start?
Yes, please.
Okay, everybody, good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Merseyside and Cheshire campaign to stop the health white paper or bill once it becomes a bill, or indeed act if it becomes an act. Just a couple of things. We are recording this meeting, so if anybody doesn't want to appear on the recording, if they can just turn the video off, that would be great. Could you turn your microphones off when you're not speaking? There will be discussion later on. If people could use their electronic hand, if you want to speak, it makes it much easier to see who's up next, etc. That would be really good. Also, if people could leave the chat for just information rather than comments, because it can get quite full and distracting, really. Okay, well, I think the first thing we'll do, I'll talk about the campaign in a minute, and we'll get cracking on the speakers, but we're going to start with a song. So I'll hand over straight away to Jess Silk. Okay, Jess.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to Mary for inviting me. Wonderful to be here, playing for everyone. I'm going to play you a protest song about people protesting about me writing protest songs. Yeah, I wrote this quite a few years ago after somebody down the pub decided he doesn't like politics in music, but I do, so I wrote this about it. This is called Don't Tell Me What to Sing About. It seems like everywhere I turn, there's another who won't learn from past mistakes they've made. It seems like everywhere I go, there's another one who knows which path I should now take. And they say it's best for everyone if you stop writing protest songs, cause there is not one thing you'll ever change. And they say, love through your history, this is how life is for you and me. Well, I'm telling you, it's always been that way. Oh, but I can't believe that this is all there is for you and me. They say life's not fair, but it's easier for those who just don't care. Well, please stop the world, cause I wanna get off coping with this, taking all the words that I have got. Please stop the world, cause you're dragging me down. And listen when I ask politely, don't tell me what to sing about. It seems like every other day there's a promise that they break, and we can't do a thing. They seem to think that we've been beaten when we're marching down the street, pretend we don't exist. And they say I don't like politics to interfere with my music or me. I don't like sugar in my tea. So now I play and write and sing, and yeah, hope that I might change something. But in the end I write these songs for me, because I can't escape all the lies and empty promises they make. When I can't see the light, well, the only thing that helps me is to write about it. Well, please stop the world, cause I wanna get off coping with this, taking all the words that I have got. Please stop the world, cause you're dragging me down. And listen when I ask politely, don't tell me what to sing about. Well, I've been doing this since I was a kid. We found the only thing that helps me sing much better than breaking down. Oh, to get it written down on the page, all the happiness, the fear and the rage, make one less thing to think about. Oh, please stop the world, 'cause I wanna get off. And coping with it's taking all the words that I have got. Please stop the world, 'cause you're dragging me down. And listen when I ask politely. Don't tell me what to sing, please stop the world, 'cause I wanna get off. And coping with it's taking all the words that I have got. Please stop the world, 'cause you're dragging me down. And listen when I ask politely. Don't tell me what to sing about. Thank you very much.
Hey,
Thanks very much. Yes, that was absolutely brilliant. A great way to start this evening proceedings. Okay, my name is Frank McIntaggart. I'm chair of We'll Defend Our NHS and one of the campaigners involved in the Merseyside and Cheshire Stop the Health White Paper. The campaign is made up of really all the campaign groups in Merseyside, all the health campaign groups in Merseyside and Cheshire, plus Wirral Trades Council, individuals, and also the regional GMB as well. And we've come together to campaign for the white paper, which has now gone through Parliament, to basically be abolished and to return to a proper NHS as we used to know it before the Lansley reforms, and indeed way before that as well. The campaign has been going now for several weeks. We've been doing a series of street stalls, and that will continue. We're also going to be involved in the July the 3rd birthday for the NHS, which is what this evening meeting is about. And also we're going to be taking the campaign forward as well. So first of all, can we kick off with two speakers, and we're going to talk about what we've done so far, and the whole idea of building a grassroots campaign, which is what this is about. We want to see a campaign similar to the anti-poll tax campaign of the early 1990s. So first of all, can I ask Mary to speak? And she's going to talk about what we've been doing so far. Over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Frank. Just wanted to really thank Jess for coming tonight and for speaking. That was absolutely brilliant. I've had that song going through my head since Saturday when I heard her sing it at the Orgreave rally. And I've put the link to Jess's Bandcamp in the chat, so if you want to hear more from her. So today we've written hundreds of letters to council candidates in the local elections in Wirral and West Lancashire before the elections in May. In the last 3 weeks, we've written to every councillor in the footprint of the Cheshire and Merseyside integrated care system. That's 9 councils comprising 579 councillors from all parties. The headline under which we've written to them is "Not on Your Watch." We've sent them detailed briefings explaining integrated care systems and the implications of the white paper. We've offered to provide more information, to speak at council meetings or party groupings, and to work with any council or councillor and any party willing to engage with us. We've had some replies, but not many, considering the number of emails we've sent. The replies we did receive ranged from replies saying they're not responsible and directing us to other councillors, to saying they're planning a meeting to discuss the meaning of the integrated care system, or that they don't understand, to disclaiming responsibility for waving through the remodelling. And then there are some that have supported our campaign and want more information, particularly the Green Party grouping in the Wirral are interested in learning more about it. The integrated care systems are restructured and they're made to sound complicated, using misleading vocabulary, ignoring traditional boundaries and local historical arrangements. The chief officer of the Lancashire and South Cumbria ICS has been known to berate the members of the committees if they stray into the old way of thinking, and they have spent a lot of money on consultancy firms to re-educate them, to make them understand this new way of thinking, which is the American model of health. Some councillors have claimed that they're mitigating the worst excesses of the bill and claim to have reached an agreement whereby each of the 9 councils across the footprint have 1 councillor on the ICS board. However, recent government guidance is that there will be 1 councillor from the ICS footprint. So that's 1 councillor out of all of the 579 councillors. And that councillor will not represent their local government sector. So who or how will the 9 councils decide which 1 councillor is the chosen one, or will it be the integrated care system chief who can bestow such gifts? We are not looking for mitigation or amelioration, and to quote our very own Dr. Alex Scott Samuel, that's just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. What we're calling for from councillors is a wholehearted, loud and vocal public opposition to integrated care systems, particularly Labour councillors, just like the uproar we heard from football fans in the 48 hours it took them to turn around the involvement of US corporations and the European Super League. If we don't want US global giants running our football, we certainly don't want them running our NHS. We'll be following our letters up to councillors, reminding them that this is the wholesale destruction of the NHS and that this is going to go down in the history books as the biggest theft perpetrated on a population in history. Another campaign action over the last 3 weeks was the distribution of 5,000 leaflets to NHS staff at their shift changeover, mainly at 7 a.m. in the morning. And we've been lucky, we've had some nice weather. Our campaigners were outside the Royal, Aintree, Liverpool Women's Hospital, Arrow Park, Alderhay, Southport, and we also attended a picket with striking biomedical scientists at Burnley General Hospital. Greg may speak more about that industrial action in Burnley later. We handed out the KOMP leaflet aimed at NHS staff, and it was very well received by them. We could see them reading it before their shifts, as they came off shift, and during their breaks. For the last month, campaigners have been holding stalls in West Kirby, Wallasey, Ellesmere Port, Crewe and Chester with a good reception and causing merriment with handing out leaflets via fishing nets to ensure social distancing. These stalls will continue. We're planning more stalls across Sefton, Knowsley, South Liverpool and also in Blackburn over the next few weeks. Please get in touch with us if you can do a stall or if you want to come and help us on a stall. The idea is to have them all over the footprint of Cheshire and Merseyside and beyond. We can supply you with leaflets and posters, or alternatively, you can come and join us and bring your fishing net. Other work we've undertaken is to speak at many meetings, organisations, campaign groups, political party meetings, union branches, trades councils, area activist meetings, North West Health committees, and privately with a wide range of union officials and MPs and supporters. And we've obviously got some our MP supporters here. This is getting the message out. It's getting the ICS motion passed and pushing through the layers of parties and unions, bringing people on board with our campaign and spurred some of them on to start their own campaigns. We've learned lots of new skills, we've made new friends and we've built relationships, and it has to be said, we've also ruffled a few feathers, which is exactly the aim of our campaign. We need people to feel uncomfortable about what they're wading through. Zoom has enabled us to reach audiences we may never have reached before. We want all unions and all sectors talking about this attack on the NHS, not just health unions and branches. We all need the NHS. Our efforts are gaining momentum, and as we speak to each group, they are horrified to learn what's happened to the NHS, the way it's been restructured without any political mandate and without any statutory authority to do so. Our campaigners attend CCG meetings, ICS, hospital board meetings, councils, health and wellbeing meetings, and we raise freedom of information questions and hold them to account where we can. We're building a movement. Anyone who can help with our actions can write letters or is on social media is welcome to come and help. Our campaign didn't just start this year. It started years ago, defending Liverpool Women's Hospital against the restructuring which we are currently seeing. 2 years ago, we stopped a price list for NHS charges in Warrington Hospital when they brought in their My Choice price list, and we spent 2 weeks distributing 5,000 leaflets at that point and lobbying MPs, getting letters in the Daily Mirror and in the Echo, and we paused that campaign, that price list, but it was only paused, and it will be brought back, and it was pushed through in other parts of the country. So this has been an ongoing campaign, but we've really stepped up now, the collective campaign of all the campaign groups across Cheshire and Merseyside. So anyone who can help us, please do come and join us. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Mary. That was really good. That's a really good overview of what we've been doing up to now. I feel exhausted just hearing it. Okay, the next speaker is Felicity, who's going to talk about building a grassroots social movement for the NHS. Over to you, Felicity.
I'd like to thank everyone who's come tonight, especially such a lovely summer evening, and people could well find interesting things to do instead. But thank you for coming, and to all those people who'd like to have been here and sent their apologies, and to our comrades amongst the NHS Workers Unite who are meeting tonight in a parallel meeting to discuss the campaign as it affects the NHS workers. Now, Mary said it, and I'm going to emphasise it, that we're organising to reclaim the NHS. We're going to demand very clearly that we want world-class healthcare for all. Obviously, from the Women's Hospital campaign, that particularly means we want to have the level of care for maternity that most of Europe has, not to have more stillbirths than they do, not to have more women die in childbirth than they do. We want world-class healthcare for everybody. And we do mean to everybody, no exceptions. We want to have, that care to be free at the point of need. We want it to be paid for by general taxation. We want it to provide all the necessary treatments, both common and unusual. We can't go back to this thing of people saying, oh, well, I can't get that treatment, the NHS doesn't provide it anymore. We have to have all the treatments. It's got to be publicly provided as a public service, not as a for-profit organisation. We've got to have well-paid, well-regulated staff on national paying conditions. And those professions have got to be properly regulated, not changed by the Secretary of State, as this white paper would let it happen. And that the care has to reflect the local conditions. We believe that the NHS came from campaigners in our movement. And I've got here in front of me, those of you that have followed the Women's Hospital campaign will have seen me wave this around before. It's a little book called Maternity, Letters from Working Women, collected by the Women's Cooperative Guild in 1916. And it's when they started to fight for a health service, a national health service, free at the point of need for every woman and every child in childbirth. 1916 they started and they won. So let's not forget, we might think times are tough for us, but we've got history in this movement and we can win things. So Liverpool Women's Hospital is still there. It still faces challenges. It's part of its temporarily closed one of its midwife-led units because of staffing problems. Staffing problems translates into finance problems. But it's still there 5 years later after the fight. So don't give up and think there's nothing we can do. We're facing legislation that will put into law stuff that's already been underway now in a system first described as STPs and condemned as such by Labour Party conference, and now called ICSs, integrated care systems. We need to look at what happened to the NHS during austerity. It was massively underfunded, deliberately and cruelly, year on year. It's understaffed. They closed a massive number of beds, so it has far less beds per head of population than the rest of Europe has. It has too few doctors, Too much of the work has been outsourced, right back to Thatcher's time, but more particularly in this period of austerity. The internal market and PFI have all drained resources away from the patient care. Our mental health service now is in a dreadful state. Most beds, or many beds, are now owned by the Priory Group. Some patients are by policy denied treatment. And the Children's CAM service is offering a much reduced service for which children will pay for the rest of their lives. It's hard to get a GP appointment and very difficult indeed to get a dental appointment. We need large investment of funds to rebuild and restore the NHS. We've seen the terrible experience of COVID-19 with a heroic staff, very many dead, just walk along that really sad wall opposite Parliament, seeing all the little red hearts with the names in it, where of all the people who've died of COVID. But it's too soon, Hancock says, for an inquiry into what went wrong in COVID. But it's fine to go ahead with a major reorganisation that claims to embed the benefits of what's been learned during the pandemic. It really does need to stop. And amelioration, as Mary said, which is advocated by many well-meaning people, has not worked very well for the NHS up to now. So let's not argue it can be done now. I'd love to spend hours talking to you about how social services and integration with social services, it is a joke, it cannot possibly work, but that needs a whole other meeting. This legislation is going to mean that we split the NHS into 42 different areas, and they will be different. Already they are different. The different things that have been implemented in each area is already segmenting the national service off. There's going to be a mix of the budgets with social services, and social services have been appallingly cut by austerity. The Secretary of State is going to have the right to give money directly to social service providers, the private sector. The local authority budgets will be tied in to the population funding caps and limits. Big business can be on the boards, which is the new managing boards, and they already, Virgin already is in Somerset. We're going to work on the basis of population funding, that's capped funding rather than patient needs. They're going to reward savings so that if the providers make savings, then that money is going to be kept by the providers. And the HSSF is something every trade union involved in the NHS needs to be aware of. It's a list of approved providers who don't have to go through any further form of approval before they get an NHS contract. And the Secretary of State is going to take further control over the regulation of professions. So what you can do, and every single person here can do something. Talk to your friends and family and tick that off. I've done that. Stop the data grabs. Sign. You've got about 24 hours left. Sign it. Stop the data grabs so they can't take your data. Put up a poster in your window, in your local shop, on your street. Write to your MP or your councillor. Raise it in your union branch. Raise it in your church. Leaflet your own street. Attend the rally on July the 3rd. Help with the stall. Attend one of our training sessions. Set up a little meeting in your own area, just with a few people. We'll send a speaker. Keep up the pressure and join one of the health service, health defence campaign organisations that are around in the area. If we fight, we can just win. And it has to be from the ground up, with them the government understanding that the people who, the granddaughters and the grandsons of the people who fought for the NHS in the first place have not forgotten the lessons that their grandmothers taught them and get fighting for the NHS. Thank you for listening, and I hope everybody is able to take some part in our ongoing campaigns. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Felicity. That was very, very inspiring indeed. Right, our next speaker really needs no introduction. So I'll just go straight into it, and it gives me great honour to welcome John McDonnell MP. John, over to you.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks for inviting me. Ian, myself, and Margaret are here. We're here as a tag team, basically, how we operate. Okay. And Jess, thanks a lot for the song. It was terrific. It was really great. Thank you. Look, Felicity and Mary have summed it all up, so there's little for us to add, really. But let me just say this. I'm trying to get across to, it's a point that Felicity and Mary have made it. I'm trying to get across to people just how serious the situation is at the moment. See, I think this is the most serious threat to the NHS that we've seen its whole history. The reason it's serious is because it's a sort of a quiet and secret threat that's going on. And they use the language, who can argue about concepts of integrated care? Everyone wants integrated care in some form, but that's not what they're about. I generally think now that we're on the edge, and this people, I think, you know, they underestimate just how ruthless Johnson and this group of Tories are. I think, you know, they've got an 80 majority and they think they can do what they want, and they think they can trample over Parliament, the courts, all the other democratic institutions, and that's what they'll do. So the point of tonight's meeting is exactly right. And I just pay tribute to you all for organising all the work that you've been doing. It's just been fantastic. I agree with you, Frank. Listening to it is exhausting in itself. But I think our job is just to mobilise. It's almost to shake people up and mobilise them and say, look, in this next 18 months, you may not have an NHS because the legislation hasn't been published yet. We expect it in the next couple of weeks, the health bill. But if it's based upon the white paper, exactly as Mary and Felicity have said, it means the integrated care systems will be imposed right the way across the country, and it will be on the basis of removing virtually all democratic accountability or control, bringing the private sector actually in a decision-making process, not just receiving contracts, but awarding the blinking things. So this is a complete we fought against the 2012 health bill, if you remember. We fought against the one before that the Tories were introducing as well in the 90s. This is nothing in comparison with that. This is the big one. And I think if they get away with it, I think people will realise what have we lost, and we'll have lost the NHS because the private sector will have taken over. And there's someone put in the chat about how did we get here? Well, it's exactly as Felicity and Mary have said. First of all, they start softening up with 11 years of austerity. And then we get to the COVID crisis. Because of austerity, we've got to remind people we were in the worst possible position to cope with the pandemic. 100,000 staff, vacancies in the NHS, 40,000 nurse vacancies. Why? Because they would cut the NHS. Instead of giving us the 4% a year we should have had, they cut it down to 1%. So no wonder there was a financial crisis in the NHS. They freeze wages for 10 years. So no wonder it's difficult maintaining and retaining people and recruiting NHS staff. And then in social care, exactly the same. So they brought us to a crisis. And now having witnessed heroes and heroines in the NHS and right the way across the public sector get us through the pandemic, what they're now doing, they've seen the opportunity, to be honest, of full-scale privatisation. It's interesting. I was in a discussion last night. I brought together Prem Sikka, the professor of accountancy, Daniela Gabor, a professor is an expert on shadow banking, and also John Christensen from the Tax Justice Campaign. And we were talking about the G7 deal. And Daniela made a big point, I think a really important point. It hadn't really dawned on me properly. She was saying that the scale of tax avoidance and tax evasion at the moment by the multinationals is at such a level that actually there's huge amounts of capital sitting there, not knowing where to go, where to invest. So that capital is now being used basically for the privatization process. And if you look at any country in the world, what we've got at the moment is almost like vultures, a limited number of companies, anything between 10 and 50, hovering above our welfare state, looking for privatization for the investment opportunities that they have, so they can then basically, in privatization, profit from them in the long term. And that's exactly what this legislation is all about. And we've already seen it. 10 years of austerity, at least £15 billion worth of privatisation under the Tories already in putting services out to the private sector. I don't know whether you saw, Jeremy was on a demonstration the the other day about Centene, the way in which an American company has taken over GP practices in the Southeast at the moment. And again, it's all part and parcel of this privatization. But this legislation will enable them to sell off the NHS wholesale, and it will be on the basis of losing all democratic control. And whatever they call it, an integrated care system or whatever, it isn't. This is about privatization and sell-offs that will impact upon us all. The stuff that came out today, you most probably saw the announcement by Hancock, Hopeless Hancock, as someone once described him, but you saw the announcement by him on the data. The NHS data now, they're building up this NHS database, what they call the data store. The data store is being managed, developed by a company called Palantir. That's a company employed by Donald Trump to harass migrants and introduce the anti-migrant system in the US. That data is worth, if you look at the last valuation by the group called Med Confidential or Foxglove, the two groups that are independently looking at this, they reckon it's anything between 5 and 10 billion pounds. What the data store will do, no matter what assurances Hancock will give, it will take patient data, it will enable then private companies to access that. He's saying for research, I think it'll be for maximization of their profits. It is valuable information that they'll use and exploit to their advantage. And it's just step by step now, this element of the wholesale privatization of the NHS. And for this is right, the whole concept of the NHS is that actually it's free at the point of need. How long do you think that will last under the private sector dominance? Very little short period of time, no matter what assurances the Tories give us at the moment. So I think we're at an incredibly dangerous moment. I really do. The combination of austerity, the hangover of the PFI debts of about 55 billion pounds, the way in which they've already introduced an element of privatization over this last period in particular, and now this legislation. So I think that's why we need to mobilize people in every form we possibly can. The good thing about it, though, is actually like meetings like this are going on all over the country at the moment, people coming together, and they're willing now, I think, I think they're beginning to wake up to the threat. They're willing to actually get out there now and start campaigning again. I know we've all been locked down during the COVID crisis, etc., but people are being incredibly creative now about what action they can take. In the chat, someone has asked what's happening within the unions themselves. A number of the unions now are beginning to look at the forms of action that they can take, both in terms of how they communicate with their staff, how they communicate with patients and the wider community, and they come together in solidarity. There's been a huge breakthrough in this last month. I'm a member of Unison. We've just had our NEC elections. We now have a left campaigning group now that are a majority on the Unison NEC. And whereas there's been an element of passivity from the union in the past, I don't think that's ever going to happen again with this new leadership that's in position. So you can see unions mobilizing, individual communities mobilizing, and I think we've got to make sure we focus that in terms of the government itself. And, you know, even though the Tories have got an 80-seat majority or whatever, there's a large number of Tories who are sitting actually on relatively vulnerable majorities. And I actually think if we can campaign hard enough, people have referred back to the poll tax campaign and other campaigns. If we can campaign hard enough across the movement, across the labour and trade union movement in particular, into wider communities, I think we can defeat this legislation. But whilst we do that, let me just say this as a final thing. Whilst we do that, I think we should really be talking about the NHS that we want. So we're not just defeating the Tory proposals, we are actually arguing for and convincing people about the sort of NHS that we want, which is based upon the principles of treatment free at the point of need. It's about being properly funded through a fair taxation system. And that means making sure we redistribute wealth through taxation from the rich to the public services, and from the proper taxation of capital gains tax, proper taxation of the corporations, and tackling tax evasion and tax avoidance seriously. And in that way, we can get an NHS properly invested in. But also what we need to do is ensure that the NHS is properly democratized as well. So it is actually therefore determined, this future will be determined by local communities. final point on all of this, in our Labour manifestos of 17 and 19, we also put in there that actually, yes, we needed to ensure the NHS was saved and properly funded and the staff properly paid and respected, but also we said we'd have to deal with social care as well. And we put forward a plan, a detailed plan for a national care service fully funded by taxation, in which workers were properly paid, but actually which came under public ownership and control as well. So I think the combination of campaigning against this legislation, but giving people a vision of the future of the NHS and the potential that there is to model social care on NHS lines, I think could inspire people in that campaign to demonstrate it's not just a negative campaign, it's a very positive one in favour of the future we want to build. So anyway, fine, I'll shut up at that point. I just want to say thanks for organising the meeting tonight. As I say, I think this is so significant, this issue now, and this coming period is absolutely critical. Mobilising for July the 3rd, I think, is absolutely vital. It gives us the basis of getting the message out, and then we'll move on to the autumn for when that legislation appears and how we take the different forms of action to prevent it being enacted, certainly in the form that the Tories want. I take the view as well, it's not about ameliorating or in this sort of legislation, it's about defeating it outright, because it is such a fundamental threat to the NHS and its future. So, solidarity.
Thank you very much for that, John. Excellent, very inspiring. Thank you very much. I know you've had your hand up for a while, Nicholas. There is going to be plenty of time for discussion. We've just got a couple of more speakers, and a few people are trying to fit in before 8 o'clock. So we'll come back to you in a bit. Our next speaker is Ian Byrne, MP for West Derby. Ian has been doing a lot with other MPs in the House of Commons on this white paper. He spoke recently in the House of Commons on it, and I'll just pass you straight over to Ian. I can't see him on the screen. I'm sure he's somewhere. Ian Byrne. Okay.
Hello, Frank.
And there he is. Hi, Ian. Cheers.
Hiya. And always great to follow John, who really is an inspiration. I'm going to say a few words, but then I want a couple of things that sprung to mind by listening to the fantastic contributions so far. So first, greetings of solidarity to everyone on this call. I know lots and lots of people, some of the best activists to know within the city and in the region. So thanks for obviously organising, because, we have got to start. We have really got to build on the campaigning that you've done in defending our communities. So it is a privilege to be here amongst friends tonight and speaking. I'd also like to pay a really quick tribute to Celia and Joe Kelly, who've been absolutely outstanding for me in West Derby, and such a help, guidance, advice on the NHS and many other subjects. And also, I don't know if Margaret's on here, but Margaret Greenwood's been inspirational as well. A passion for the NHS, second to none. She drives the fight in Parliament, and she's absolutely invaluable within that chamber in the fight to protect our NHS and represent the voices of the people on this call. And I'd also like to say another thing as well about the success of the vaccine rollout. It's down to the NHS and the staff. They've shown what a nationalised health service can achieve, and we cannot stop pushing the point. The success of the vaccine rollout is down to the NHS. The gratitude of this country should not be directed to a government who failed us on so many fronts during this crisis, and in fact, decades and decades before. I was going to talk about what basically is being spoken about tonight. So I won't go over it again, because you all know about ICS. We know the danger, the privatisation, deregulation, cronyism, which is set out in this white paper, and also it sits on the HCLG. And the planning white paper is exactly the same. It opens it up for developers, and it is, it really is. The Tories have got this majority now, and they are going for it, as John said. They are going for it, but I'd like to say a few words of hope on that, where we have over the last 6 months. I think it was Mary who spoke about and touched on, the European Super League, and when the country come together within 48 hours, some of the most powerful capitalist clubs in Europe crumbled within 48 hours because of the football fans rising up. But equally importantly was Boris Johnson's turn from, as legend has it, on the Wednesday, he fully welcomed Manchester United's representation, saying what a wonderful thing the European Super League was. Within a matter of days, when he seen public opinion change and turn, well, then he crumbled, and then obviously he put the political pressure on, which helped defeat the European Super League. So it can be done. You know, it can be done, and I think that the point is, it is, and I've spoke to a couple of people on this. We've got to mould the campaign which is all-encompassing, which reaches out to parts which we haven't reached yet, using different apparatus to get us into these areas. Now, football is one. You know, I think we've got a meeting next week on about how we can try and use what we've done within football and the Right to Food campaign. Obviously, if we look back as well, we had the Premier League in their infinite wisdom in October, I think it was now, with the football clubs decided to start charging for the football. And within 30 days, we took that on by defeating the pay-per-view campaign, which raised £500,000 for mutual aid within communities. But again, it showed you how a campaign which is targeted can actually defeat some of these organisations. And I think, you know, I think they're a microcosm of what we can actually achieve with the NHS. And I think if we do this campaign right, if it's targeted, if it really hits home with the messaging, I really believe we can do that. And we only have to look last week when we seen the by-election defeat in Chesham and Amersham, when the Lib Dems targeted the Tories on planning. HS2, but the planning white paper, and you know, some of the feedback that we've had certainly on the committee through that is that caused absolute terror within Tory shires, because you know it's impinging on their areas and potentially housing and no, and I'm not going into the argument. We do need housing, but this is more of a campaign focus. What I'm saying to you is, if we can really do a focus campaign, I firmly believe we can galvanise people around what's happening, because unfortunately, you've all been doing this for years now, and people can sort of become blinded to what's happening. And I think, as John said, this potentially is the most pivotal moment in NHS history. And I really, really believe we can achieve, by bringing the unions on board, the activists, a grassroots campaign, we can wake people up and make them realise and acknowledge the danger that the NHS is in as it stands now. I really think, to close, I join you, saying no to privatisation, no to the NHS white paper, no to the ICS, calling for the 15% funding for the NHS staff. They deserve absolutely no less. But to finish, we must use whatever position we're in to galvanise, to build, to motivate a targeted campaign which resonates right across every community. And we need that as a matter of urgency. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes, whatever I can, in my position as an MP, everything else I've done and the links that I've got. I'm sure every MP and every activist to be on the same. If we come together and we're motivated force, I honestly think we can achieve this. So again, thanks, solidarity to you all, and as I said, whatever I can do to help, it'll be a real honour in using my position to protect what is the greatest example of socialism from privateers. And I will see you all on July the 3rd. Thanks and solidarity, comrades.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. That was terrific, absolutely brilliant. Right, the next item, I think we have a solidarity message from the nurses, or to the nurses. Is that right, Felicity?
Yeah, we have a message of solidarity from the nurses, but I noticed that Laura's here, so maybe Laura would rather say it rather than us read out a message.
Okay, Laura, do you want to say a few words?
Hi.
Hiya, Laura. Hiya.
Hiya. yeah, I'll go and say a few things. Thanks for having me, and thanks for pulling this meeting together, and for everything everyone's been doing, going out, campaigning, leafleting. It's been amazing, and it's so good to have that that support network around you when sometimes things can seem so bleak, and having motivated people willing to go out and do things. I've had a lot of people helping me out, leafleting hospitals with information leaflets about Nurses United and about the demonstrations on the 3rd of July. And it's just been absolutely great to have everyone there. I also want to say, I think it's a really important time that we are agreeing with what Ian was saying there about, we really need to be getting this strategy targeted now to where people can relate to it, and it is urgent, because obviously we already know over a third of the NHS is already privatised, and I think unfortunately some people think it's okay and it's going to be it's going to go and it's going to be too late, and once it's gone, we know we would never be able to get that back. So I really do think now's the time to be highlighting it, and I think the 3rd of July is going to be a really, really big event to be getting people on board, and getting people to kind of join the fight and actually be active about it, because I think there's some people who are maybe a bit desensitized to it. Maybe they just say, well, the NHS has been under threat for years, and I don't think they're realizing the true reality of it and the extent of it, really. Obviously we do see it in our workplace. I think I've been on a placement now in A&E, and the waiting times are ridiculous, and I'm just looking, thinking we're all running around not stopping, and there's still these waiting times because we haven't got the staff or the facilities there. And it's quite sad for patients having to wait that long, and as NHS staff, we want the best care for patients. We want it to be free, and we want it to be of a high standard, and that's what we're going to fight for. So again, just thank you to everyone for the work that they're doing, and if I can help out with anything, if I'm free, because I'm always in work, but if I can ever help out with anything, just message me, let me know dates of things, and if I'm available, I'll be available to help. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Laura, and solidarity from this campaign, sure, for everybody at this meeting. Okay, we've got a few minutes for discussion before we move on. Nicholas C up there has had his hand up for quite a while. So Nicholas, would you like to ask a question or speak or whatever? And then
yes, please.
Alex is next. Okay, Nicholas.
Okay, yes, briefly. So I wanted to say to John McDonnell, I wanted to point out a few things. The coming law, Felicity mentioned, embeds things that have already been done. They are not just something vague about austerity. They are the last 7 years of so-called transformation by NHS England. And the real time to oppose that would have been over the last 7 years, really, when it was happening, and to tell the public about that. I have to underscore this because it has consequences and so on. And it was called out for a while. Diane Abbott called it out as Shadow Health Secretary. She was briefed by Open Democracy. Open Democracy was reporting on this from the start. And that narrative, she talked about US corporations changing the NHS today, now, restructuring it. People in Jeremy's office seem to believe, some of them, that it was just, they were told by somebody, whether it's Lord Kerslake and who's a friend, those people who advised Lotto, that it's just a restructuring. We shouldn't be talking about that. They seem to believe that. As you mentioned, a lot of MPs hear integration, it sounds like a good thing, whereas it's incentives to cut care, that's what it is. And I don't know if you're aware, Labour conference voted 2017, 2018, 2019 to oppose this, which is now going into the law, and it was overlooked. So essentially, there's a tragedy that the Labour right was allowed to support the government in this. That's John Ashworth. Okay, John Ashworth has never opposed this. If you look carefully at the Labour manifesto of 2019 you mentioned, it looks like he's opposing the long-term plan, but he welcomed it. And he told, his response to Matt Hancock was, Labour has long sought integration. He means the same integration. These are policies that Tony Blair's and new Labour governments worked on with Kaiser Permanente, setting up the Kaiser NHS Beacon pilot projects in England, and with United Health. They had like 10 and 6 pilot projects. That's what's being rolled out. So I'm just saying, it's because the Labour right wasn't challenged on their support for profit in healthcare.
Sorry.
Not rubbish. It's not rubbish, John.
I was there. You're not
Where
telling me
were you?
Jeremy Corbyn didn't oppose the privatisation of the NHS?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying exactly the opposite. Jeremy Corbyn stood up against New Labour in 2010, and he spoke about their downgrading and closures of hospitals, including the Whittington Hospital. And the same thing is happening now, and we didn't hear about it. We heard that it was a funding issue from somebody in Shadow Health whose position was that sustainability and transformation plans, according to the NHS Federation, his position was that they were a good idea but needed more funding. His position was the funding needed, basically the funding needs to go into those policies. No, this is the truth, John, I'm afraid. Maybe this is not the best way to talk about it.
We haven't got long. Can John come back and speak?
Yes, I want to ask that we use this time to catch up on those years.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's also about planning.
That's what I want to ask.
Actually, Nick,
I'm glad that you're in it now. Yeah.
Nicholas, it's actually about planning for July the June the 3rd.
Yes.
July the 3rd. But John, can you come back, John?
If I can just respond to that, Frank, 'cause I'm not having it, because I was there with Jeremy and Lotto. We wrote the Labour manifestos of 17 and 19. And it was actually about ensuring that we ended all privatisation. If you remember, I went to Labour Party conference in 2018 and said we were tearing up the PFIs. We were bringing it all back in-house. So we were establishing, well, basically, we supported Alison Pollock's reinstatement bill, if you remember.
Yes.
Despite some opposition within the Parliamentary Labour Party, we overrode that. So Frank, I'm not having history rewritten. Yeah. Now, whatever has happened since Jeremy stood down and whatever individual front bench people have said, that's up to the current leadership of the new administration. But I know where we stand. I know where we'll be, Jeremy and I, on July the 3rd. We'll be campaigning to protect the NHS, but more importantly, actually, to ensure that we have an NHS consolidated the future. And if you remember, we said we would end all private contracts under the NHS that we inherited. That's what we were going to do. And that was the you describe it as Lotto, that was the leadership position that we both took. And that was it. And that is reflected in both manifestos.
I know that those are your long-term positions.
Nicholas,
I'll shut up and I'll just make a comment.
Yeah, Nicholas, you have spoken for quite a long time, and there are other speakers, and we have got other business to discuss, not least the fact about what we're going to do on July the 3rd. Alex, you got your hand up, and then Tracy, and then we've got Margaret as well. Okay, Alex.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks to everyone who organised this brilliant meeting, and hello to all the wonderful people who are here tonight. Just two very brief messages, particularly aimed at our three brilliant parliamentarians, but at the rest of us as well. As has been said already by John, it's a key action to get the Labour movement on board. And anything that you, John, you, Margaret, and you, Ian, can do to get the TUC, who held a really big conference and programme of action in 2012 against the Health and Social Care Act. We need them to get the message about the Health and Care Bill and the integrated care systems. Anything that can be done to help get them on board, and of course the major health unions. Now Unison has got a left presidency and a left NEC. Anything that can be done to help get Unison actively campaigning with us, as well, of course, as Unite and the GMB and all the other unions, would be brilliant. And finally, and this is perhaps particularly aimed at John, anything that can be done to neutralise the very clever, very fragrant Simon Stevens would be appreciated. He has been conning people for the last 10 or 20 years, during which he's been planning this assault on the NHS, which, as you know, started at Davos in 2012 when he was working with McKinsey, which he's done continuously ever since. Anything that can be done, particularly once he goes into the Lords, where he will be lubricating every cog, anything that can be done would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much for that, Alex. And of course, we've got another horror coming as well, because Dido Harding's applied for his job, hasn't he? The nightmare gets worse and worse. Tracy Hilton, you got your hand up, Tracy.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. Sorry, I missed the first 10 minutes because I've been in meetings all day. You get days like that. I had to shove my tea in before I came on here. What I'd like to say is today is also Windrush Day. And as you know, many people from the Caribbean, including my grandma who came on the first Windrush in 1948 and trained to be a midwife, have contributed to the NHS. And during this pandemic, so many migrants have been essential to help us get through this. And Dido Harding's just been mentioned, and she come out with the most disgraceful thing the other day about lessening the amount of migrant healthcare workers coming in. How on earth, with a lack of investment in training doctors, and the way that doctors, nurses and healthcare workers in general are treated by the establishment at the moment, they expect that to land well, I do not know, because they do nothing to build the gap here. What they are doing when they're coming out like that is basically threatening the NHS even more than they already have, because people will just opt to not come here at all, including the UK born and trained doctors, nurses and healthcare workers. Why should they, when they're being treated the way that they're being treated and they see the ones? And yet again, we see the Tories crossing over with a bigger part of their agenda, pushing that nationalist agenda within the NHS, trying to normalise again what they think, basically how they view society, about pushing over that other thing about, trying to divide and rule and push forward this nationalistic thing. So we have to be mindful in everything that's doing that it links to so many things. Ian's already mentioned about the plan, and we've already seen they've tried to do land grabs on hospital sites. They tried to do that with Alder Hey. They've done that with schools already, with the so-called free schools, prime land and buildings given away, and everything is up for grabs. So, everything, not just our data, everything, they're literally trying to sell us now. As well, everything is to make money, and this is just, I'll just quietly go on this, which is why we need to understand within the trade union movement the distinct link between politics and trade unionism, because there is talk at the moment within trade unionism about separating from Westminster. We must always acknowledge that the Labour Party was set up by the trade unions because we need to be there. If we don't link with the politics, which is essentially what's firing all this up, then we end up with even weaker TU laws than we have now, stronger anti-TU laws as it stands, and worse conditions for everybody. Because as I was saying to somebody the other day, the Tory party, they're like the trade union for the employers, and they get loads of benefits. So we need to work together as a trade union and understand all the political links, that all of this comes together, because too many people are looking at things in a separate thing and it all joins up. And all of this is just keeping the gravy train rolling for these people. And we are just collateral damage, as we've seen during COVID, as we've seen now, where basically we're units for sale. So that's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much for that, Tracy. That was excellent. Thanks very much indeed. Okay, Margaret Greenwood has got a hand up, but she is down to speak. So you may as well go into that, Margaret. I'll just briefly introduce you. Okay, our next speaker is Margaret Greenwood MP, MP for Wirral West, and it was my MP, and it's great that for the first time in my life, I have a member of Parliament who represents represents me and also represents my political views as well. It was terrific, and it was great for a while to have Jeremy Corbyn also as the leader of the Labour Party with similar views to myself. But Margaret was a founder member of Defend Our NHS, as Ian said just before. She's been doing a huge job on looking into the white paper, speaking on the white paper, and actually reading the white paper, which is a feat in itself, I think. So I'll hand over to you, Margaret.
Thanks ever so much, Frank, and apologies, I wasn't sure if I was still going to speak because of the time constraints. Fantastic speakers tonight, and I just want to say what a privilege it is to campaign alongside all of you. As Frank said, you know, I've been in Defend Our NHS from the beginning, and the level of, I know there's other campaign groups are available, but you know, the level of commitment, the quality of the research, the dedication, the intelligence, the camaraderie is second to none. And I think that, you know, we have so much, I don't know, we have so much power within the you know, our campaign groups that we can beat this. We've got a massive job in front of us, though. I'm not going to go through everything. I've got some notes that I was going to go through, but actually Felicity and Mary have done a fantastic job around talking about, you know, what all of this means for us. But I think I do want to just make some points. As been mentioned before, you know, what's very clear in the white paper, and it's impenetrable, it's dense, it's written in such a way to make sure that people can't understand it, or people with a, you know, with a passing interest can't understand it. It's you know, it's something you have to sort of focus on. But what's very clear is that they're determined to put big business at the heart of decision in the NHS, as well as opening the door wide for privatisation and cronyism, just as we've seen throughout the pandemic. I'm sure most of you will be aware of the report in the lowdown that Virgin Care now has a seat on the partnership board of the ICS covering Bath, North East Somerset, Swindon and Wiltshire. So when, as we know, ICSs have been around since I think it's about 2016, when they're put on a statutory footing, which the government plans to do from next April. The government's intention is that there will be two boards, an NHS body and an ICS health and care partnership. And the white paper explains their functions as follows. The ICS NHS body will be responsible for the day-to-day running of the ICS, while the ICS Health and Care Partnership will bring together systems to support integration and develop a plan to address the system's public health and social care needs. Both of these bodies have allowed private sector in there. So, you know, when that sinks in, basically big business is being allowed to have a say in what health and social care we get in an area. And this is a fundamental change to what we expect from the National Health Service. So as well as being providers, you know, because the purchase provider split, they're also going to be heavily involved, I suspect, in drawing up what we're allowed to get. So we've all been aware of the erosion of provision. You know, it's hard to get a GP, you know, it's hard to get certain treatments. Doctors have got to jump through hoops to be able to give treatments that just a few years ago, they just forward you to a specialist. But these proposals, I believe, and this is something John was talking about, they fundamentally change what we as individual patients can expect to receive from our National Health Service. Because instead of being entitled to a comprehensive universal NHS as originally conceived in 1948, instead of having a public service, we will have around 42 health and care systems, each with a finite budget for a specific geographical area. And once that budget is gone, it's gone. So Rishi Sunak has already announced that ICSs will not be able to run deficits on their single pot budgets. While the government said it's possible in principle for an NHS trust within a system to run a deficit, spending will need to be balanced across the system, and NHS England's ambition is for all organisations to be in financial balance by 2023-24. When that happens, I think we all know that means we will see quite a sharp increase in rationing of care and people being denied the treatment that they need. Quite different to the arrangements at the moment. You know, currently what happens is in a hospital, it's allowed to run a deficit and patients continue to receive treatment based on their needs. It's simple, it's efficient, it's the envy of the world. Going forward, if the government gets its way, that isn't going to happen. Those specific limits on the amount of money available for healthcare in an area like Cheshire and Merseyside, and after that, once it's gone, people will either go without or they will have to pay for it. So it's a fundamental change in what we are going to be allowed to have. I put in a question to the Minister to ask whether their proposals impact on the NHS constitution. And they've come back and said, it's in a written question, they've said that civil servants are looking at that to see whether or not they need to amend the NHS constitution. So, you know, that's how serious it is, as you all know. You don't need me to tell you that. So I think that given the scale of the majority, what's so important, and you know, Mary, when you're going through everything you've been done, I was exhausted just listening to you. So, I mean, it's amazing the work that the campaign teams are doing, absolutely fantastic. I think that because the Tories have this massive majority, we need to get to a situation where they are being inundated with emails from constituents about the issues. And because the white paper is dense and, you know, it doesn't leap off the page in little sound bites, that's for sure. The things I think that we need to get out there in terms of messaging, and we do, as Ian and Laura have said, you know, there's a real urgency to it and we need a targeted strategy. But we need people writing to their MPs or going to visit, well, visiting on Zoom their MPs and calling out what this white paper means. So there's the point about putting big business at the heart of decision making, which we've been talking about. There's it embeds the postcode lottery. There's been a postcode lottery for some time, but this will legislate for a postcode lottery, because if each ICS has to come up with a plan for the health and social care for the area, then those plans are going to be different. So what you're going to be able to get will vary depending on which part of the country that you're in. And it will lead to the deregulation of NHS professions. So, because as I think it was Leslie mentioned, talked about the power to remove a profession from regulation. This is beyond extraordinary. You know, this country traditionally has been very good at regulation, about, you know, making sure things are safe and all the rest of it. This government actually wants to remove all of that, not all of it, I'm being recorded. They want to remove regulation. Professor Kailash Chand, who's Honorary Vice President of the BMA, has said, the core thrust of the new reforms is to deprofessionalise and downskill the practice of medicine in this country so as to make staff more interchangeable, easier to fire, and services more biddable and above all cheaper. So of course this has got implications for the quality of care and healthcare that we're all going to receive. It has implications for those people working in those sectors. That, along with some very brief references in the white paper to organisational change, and they talk about the need to minimise uncertainty and employment changes. It goes on to say, we're therefore seeking to provide stability of employment and will work with NHS England and staff representatives to manage this process. To me, that should send alarm bells to everybody in the trade union movement about what is coming down the track. There's been lots of talk about working across silos, between organisational boundaries and so on. So our trade unions, as many speakers have said, are going to be absolutely key in fighting this. And then the proposal, the final proposal that they're putting forward that I would really share with people when talking to them and why this is so bad. And this is something, because I think we need to think about, you know, what things will rattle Tories. They won't care about privatisation, to be fair. They will care about deregulation of professions. They will care about rationing. So talking about the single pot of money and when it's gone is important. And they will care about the proposals for discharge to assess. So discharge to assess is a means by which they want to put into permanent legislation a method of discharging patients from acute care in hospitals, and here's the quote, by putting in a legal framework for a discharge to assess model whereby NHS continuing healthcare and NHS funded nursing care assessments and Care Act assessments can take place after an individual has been discharged from acute care. It goes on to say, this will replace the existing legal requirement for all assessments to take place prior to discharge. So discharges to assess has been done in pilot form since 2016, and it's been being done under the Coronavirus Act because the government was arguing we need to get people out of hospital because of COVID. But since the Coronavirus Act was passed, over 4 million people have been discharged under discharge to assess, and yet the government has not carried out any review of the clinical outcomes of those patients, those people. So I've pushed the minister on this, and they've said that the NHS has commissioned an independent evaluation of this, and that the evaluation is due to report in autumn of this year. To my mind, it's absolutely extraordinary that ministers are pressing ahead to introduce a policy whose clinical outcomes they don't yet fully understand within the white paper. And the concern is this, that if you haven't fully assessed a patient before discharge from hospital, you risk a situation where patient comes out, families across the country feel that they're going to have to pick up the pieces to look after a relative when they don't even really know what that relative's needs are because they haven't been assessed. Paid, so that's unpaid carers. People who work in the care sector may well find themselves looking after patients that they're not actually equipped or trained to look after, which puts them in a situation that is very stressful and also potentially being at risk in terms of being held responsible for things that are beyond their area of expertise. And then for patients who don't have family or friends around them, you know, those people are potentially going to be left isolated without the care that they need, no way of knowing when they're going to get it. And we know that, you know, waiting times for all sorts of things just extend and extend. So I think this is a really frightening proposal. I think it's reckless. It's about, you know, basically getting people out of hospital quickly. So I think that Tories will care about discharge to assess. You know, they will be worried about that. They will be worried about rationing, and they will be worried about deregulation. So I think that when we're campaigning on this, we really need to focus on those points to make sure that everybody knows what's coming down the track. As John said, this is, and as you all know, this is a pivotal moment really, and we have to do everything we can to make sure as many people as possible understand what's going to happen and fight it. I just want to mention as well, I wrote a letter, an open letter to Boris Johnson. It was signed by over 20 parliamentarians. John did agree to it, but somehow your name wasn't on there, so it was a slight mix up there. But I pinned it to the top of my Twitter feed. If people want to read it, it's because if you haven't had the time to read the white paper, but you want to sort of look at some of the detail of it, it goes through some of the detail of it. So I've just pinned it up there for people to look at if they would find that of interest. But essentially, this has to be the battle of our lives. I don't know when the white paper's coming. It could be any time soon, really. And we don't know what they've got. I mean, it's curious because the white paper says precious little about care, very little about care. It's about how to get people out of hospital, but they haven't come forward with their proposals for care. So we've got these sort of curious situations where MPs are going to be asked to vote on something that's meant to be a health and care bill. We don't know what those plans are going to be yet. So fantastic campaign. So privileged to be able to work with all of you, and a massive thank you to everybody who sends me articles because it really, really helps. So please just keep on doing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Margaret. And full of detail as ever of what the horror is we have in store if we allow this to go through, which we won't. We will defeat it. Irene, you got your hand up. Can I just bring you in briefly?
Oh, thank you, Frank.
We can move on. Okay.
Thank you, Frank. I'll try and be really brief. It's been so good tonight. And we know that this started so many decades ago. And basically what I'm trying to say, not very well, and it's probably not right for this moment, but I think it's really important that the left, we missed a trick because it's about the erosion of the welfare state completely, with housing, education, health, transport. Everything has been taken away from us. And had we argued that, we might have been able to win more people over than what appears single issues. And with health, if you're not actually involved with health, then you don't know what's happening to it. It's just something in the background that you hardly think about. So what I would like to say, not for now, but for some of the movers and shakers around, is how can we reintroduce proper political education? I don't mean just Marx as a catechism. I'm a Marxist, but I don't want Marx as a catechism. Proper political education about the structures in our society that are eroding our abilities and our rights. I don't know what people think about that. So everything's great. I support everything. I just want to add political education in somewhere, if we ever could. Thanks.
Okay, Irene, thanks very much for that. Yeah, okay. I think we'll move on now to ask Greg to speak. Greg Drock, and apparently he's had his hand up, but I can't see him on the screen for some reason. But Greg is going to speak anyway on the implications of all this for the staff. So, Greg, if you'd like to come in now.
Thank you, Frank. The reason I had my hand up was I didn't know whether you still wanted me to speak, so glad to hear you do. Okay, I've picked up that some of the points that I want to make may have been dealt with already, so I'll try to edit the ones that I think you may have done. But let's start with this Virgin thing that Margaret referred to. The point I want to make here is that Virgin is one of 200 companies that are accredited under the Health System Support Framework, which is an NHS England scheme to accredit companies to support the development of integrated care systems. Can you just tell me, have you already talked about the Health System Support Framework tonight?
No.
Okay.
Not as such.
This, in my opinion, is one of the absolutely key components of what's going on now. There's 200 companies, which include 30 US firms or 30 US owned firms, which are involved in the health market, providing health insurance or supplying services to insurers. And they include very big companies like IBM, Optum, which is owned by United Health, Cerner, Centene, Palantir, a very long list. And the bill is expected to allow them onto ICS boards, which Margaret did refer to, but also onto committees, which is possibly even more crucial. And they will have pivotal roles in setting up digital and data systems. And I just want to read off what Virgin is accredited under the HSSF to do. 6 things: shared or integrated care records, development of service change and reconfiguration proposals, transformation project and program management, organizational redesign, governance, payment and contract reform, workforce and leadership development, patient pathway optimization and care model design. So what this means is this is not about Virgin getting a contract to run a service that's been designed by the NHS. This is about Virgin and other transnationals lined up to tell the NHS how it should redesign and govern itself with new payment systems and contract models and develop the workforce to deliver new models of care. That is how new this situation actually is. Now, what I'm going to be talking about is what this means for the staff. There are 3 issues, and I know you've touched on some of this, but I think it's going to be faster if I just go ahead and do it. There are 3 issues here: national agreements, flexible working, and deregulation. So talk about the agreements, first of all. Currently, NHS staff are covered by national agreements on wages, terms, and conditions. The agreement covering all healthcare staff, apart from doctors and dentists, is called Agenda for Change. Neither the white paper nor the consultation which NHS England ran over Christmas, nor the workforce strategy for Cheshire and Merseyside mentions Agenda for Change or wages, terms, and conditions. And in fact, if you go to the workforce strategy for Cheshire and Merseyside and you search for the word pay, there's only one thing that comes up, and it is, and I quote, "We must improve the experience of our people. At every level, we need to pay much greater attention to why many of them leave the NHS." I mean, what an amazing thing to say. But anyway, as I think people have said, breaking the NHS into 42 separate ICSs, each with their own budget, will threaten everything. But specifically, it will threaten the national agreement, because each ICS will be trying to cut the costs in its own area. And staffing is the biggest item because healthcare is still labor intensive, although of course they want to change that. Now, if you go back to 2012, employers in the Southwest tried to break from Agenda for Change. It was called the Southwest Pay Cartel, and all the unions, including the RCN, fought it off. But here's what NHS England, or NHS South of England, which was the regional body, had to say about it at the time. They said, "We're aware that some employers are considering working more collaboratively in order to ensure that their pay frameworks represent best value for money. The Strategic Health Authority," that's them, "continues to work with employers and trade unions in applying national terms and conditions where employers do not have the freedom to develop their own." In other words, we'd like employers to have the freedom to break from the national agreements, but if they can't, then we'll help them implement the national agreements. That's what they were saying 10 years ago. Now, the integrated care systems will give employers that freedom. And we know that because before Christmas, an NHS England consultation on reform of the payment system stated the blended payment model, which is what they're trying to bring in, will involve, first of all, a fixed payment based on the costs of delivering a level of activity conforming to the ICS system plan. The fixed payment would be based on consideration of costs rather than prices. So in other words, they're doing away with the tariff. The value of the fixed payment would be determined locally. That's the key sentence. The value of the fixed payment would be determined locally. Fixed payments would be expected to include funding for new ways of delivering services, for example, where there are service design changes. Now, the point is that a locally determined fixed-based payment based on consideration of costs means that there is no guarantee that staff costs will be tied to a national agreement on wages, terms, and conditions. And this is the point that should really ignite the fight by all unions that organize inside the health service. And so far, that hasn't happened. And the only guarantee in the latest stuff from NHS England, and Margaret did refer to this, applies to staff who are being transferred into the ICS body, like people who work for the CCG now and are going to get transferred into the ICS body. Their terms and conditions will be protected. Well, that doesn't say anything about the 1 million other people who work in the NHS. The second issue for staff is flexibility. And I know that you will be, I think you will be aware of this. But anyway, the NHS England says that the ICS body should work with organizations across the ICS to develop new ways of working and delivering care, blah, blah, blah. This should be enabled by, listen to this, inclusive employment models, workforce sharing arrangements, and passporting or accreditation systems. What does this actually mean? It means that staff will be redeployed as and when necessary. They'll have a little passport, which enables them to go work wherever they want to send them. That will interfere with union organization because you're going to be redeployed all the time. It will demoralize staff. It will reduce continuity of care because different people will be dealing with different people in different places all the time. It will undermine local knowledge and team working. And on top of all that, it means people are going to be traveling more, which is bad for the environment as well as staff. The phrase inclusive employment means to me that there will be a whole slew of different employers that you, when you are signed up to this, could be redeployed into. Now, some of those could be private sector. So you thought you were working for the NHS, and then it turns out you're working for Virgin. Later on in the document, NHS England say that NHS bodies are expected to, and here's an amazing quote because it's not even English, adopting a simplified cloud-first infrastructure that provides agility and frictionless cross-site working experience for the workforce. I mean, that's basically gobbledygook, but what it conveys to me is that they are fixated on the computer system. They think if they set the computer system up so that people can move from one place to another, that's the end of the problem. The third issue for the unions is deregulation. And here I do know that you've talked about it. I'm sure you've talked about the article about non-nurses being given nursing roles and the RCN kicking off about it. And I know you've talked about taking professions out of deregulation, deregulating professions, taking professions out of regulation. The only comment I want to make about that one, beyond what I assume you've talked about, is that the assumption here is that if something is in a program, if something is in an app, if there's an algorithm for it, then the worker doesn't have to have the same level of competence and doesn't have to have the same level of regulation. Well, this is bullshit because computer programs don't work 100% of the time. And it's the job of the health professional to know when the computer is giving the wrong answer, and at the very least to ask a question to their line manager about what's gone wrong. The final deregulation, though, is that the bill will remove the NHS from the scope of the Public Contracts Regulations 2015, which is a legislation inherited from Europe, and it's being promoted in the spin as an end to privatization. But what it actually means is an unregulated market without the protections in PCR 2015, under which, and I quote, contracting authorities may consider incorporating social, ethical, and environmental aspects into specifications, contract conditions, and award criteria. In addition, specific rules have been included for handling abnormally low tenders. and on the exclusion of suppliers who have violated certain social, labor, and environmental laws. And by the way, that includes ILO conventions like the right of freedom of association and the right to strike. Those protections will vanish. That's the real meaning of getting out of PCR 2015. Well, the context that we're in is that over the last year, the government spent £37 billion on a corporate test and trace, which failed, even as the Delta variant emerged, when case numbers were low and the timing was ideal for it to work. The government threw billions more at private sector crony contracts, like those in the latest revelation from the Good Law Project, which you're probably aware of, and time's running out, so I won't tell you. But the thing is, the government have the audacity to claim that their response to COVID is the model for redesigning the entire NHS through partnerships with the private sector. When we look at COVID, we see massive government failure. What they see, or what they proclaim, is a success. And they want to redesign the whole NHS on the basis of what they did with COVID. So this is incredibly dangerous. And the unions really should wake up to this. And I can only imagine that they haven't quite figured it out yet. So anything we can do to get that message through is important. What we've been doing, which I'm sure Mary has said, is we've gone straight out to the staff with the leaflet. We've been to at least 5 different hospitals, and we're going to do more. There's a model motion. We want to talk to people about this. We want to put pressure on the MPs over it. And we want everybody to get involved in this. This has to be a mass campaign. I think that message has come through from what I've heard of the meeting, and I'm sorry that I couldn't come here from the beginning. But anyway, the point is, this will be a big issue for the staff, and that could be the way that we unlock it. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for that, Greg. That was absolutely superb, and so much important and vital information in all of that. Okay, I did have somebody had their hand up, but I can't see that now.
That
Richard,
was me.
Yeah, Richard, you want to come in briefly? Yeah, and then we've got a few other things to do. Richard, go on.
I want to. How can we possibly make this a success? Not enough people seem to be aware of what's happening to the NHS. We really need to go all in somehow, even if it means a TV ad that we crowdfund. We have to save the NHS. We really need to go all in.
Okay, thanks for that, Richard. Yeah, I mean, it is making people aware, isn't it, more and more, and whatever we can do is so important. Right. Okay. We need to talk about the arrangements for July the 3rd, and also what we're going to do after July the 3rd. And then if the speakers, I think a couple of them have had to go. What just want to wrap up. That would be great. So arrangements for July the 3rd. Who was dealing with that? Was that you, Felicity? Or
okay, I'll certainly start it. I mean, people are saying we've got to make sure people know, and that's the starting point. And we can't be angry that they don't know, and we shouldn't be angry with ourselves that they don't know. We've got to be steady and sensible in making sure we get this message out properly. Now, Laura's here still, and Laura, the model that the nurses are using is one that we can emulate, where we're talking to small groups of people to start with and then building it up. But our attitude is contagious. Once people think that we're fighting for the NHS as it should be, and we're not just moaning about what's wrong, we're demanding what it is, what we want, people respond. So very sensibly, very determinedly, we've got to get moving. Now, I've got to say thank you to the GMB, because their promised donation arrived today. So we've got a big financial clout from the GMB. It doesn't mean we've got enough money, but we have got, we're not actually going to go into overdraft for the leaflets we've produced. I'm not sure if this will work, but we have some absolutely huge banner posters that we can put up. if anyone who's got access to a really big window where it can be seen, but they are A0, they're the full-size posters. We've got A3 posters at standard size for posters. We've got the smaller ones, A4 posters. We've got tiny little ones, like, let's see, like this, business size ones. We've got A6 posters, very easy to hand out. And we've got the A4 ones, you can get a shop to put it in the window for you. So there's plenty for everyone to do. All you need to do to get us to send you the material you might want for your area is to email us or stick it in the chat, and we'll get stuff in the post to you or bring it round really quickly. Now, on the day, we're hoping that on the day before, we'll be able to go and do a bit of a birthday kind of stall outside the hospitals. But apart from that, on the day, on the Saturday, there's going to be 3 events that we know of so far in our area. Those 3 events are the static protest outside St George's Hall, socially distanced static protest outside St George's Hall in Liverpool. There's going in Chester, they're meeting initially outside the Countess, then they're walking from the Countess down to the town hall, outside the town hall for another outdoor protest there. And in Southport, I've not got all the details of Southport, so if there's someone here from Southport can tell us, but certainly there's going to be a stall in Southport. So let us know, what, if you can come, or if you want to just leaflet your street, or you want to put posters in your window. July the 3rd is definitely on. We're very aware of the COVID risks. We're not going to do a march because of the COVID risks. We're going to do a static protest at St George's Hall with the nurses who will be leading it. The next thing we want to say is it doesn't stop at July the 3rd. It's not, okay, that's over. It's an attempt to get people together so that we can build the campaign still more. Now, those of you who are from Merseyside, if your area hasn't got itself organised, hasn't got stalls in your area, let us know, we'll come and help you get one started. If your union branch hasn't affiliated to this campaign, let us know, we'll try and get that sorted. But if you're from outside and you want to work with us, get in touch and we'll work with you. I'm very much aware there are great campaigners here from outside our area. I want to say thank you to Deborah Harrington for being here. It's really brilliant to have some of the national campaigners here. And your information is immensely useful. But this is a grassroots campaign. It doesn't matter how minimal your contribution can be. We need you there. We've got the equipment. We need to get out. We need more people working on social media. So contact me if you can do social media work, Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. We've got lots of stuff for use on that. So there's lots going on. I'll leave it. Yes, someone's just put on the. It's 11 a.m. on the 3rd of July at St George's Plateau. One of one of the Chester people can come in and confirm the times for Chester, and anyone could confirm the times in Southport, please let us know. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Felicity. Can I just add that there will probably be some action on the Wirral as well, and we're meeting tomorrow night to sort out what that's going to be. That will probably be something outside Arrow Park Hospital, I would think, but I'm preempting things there. But we'll plan for that, and then we can get the publicity out for anybody who wants to do something on the Wirral. Okay, I think we've covered everything now. It's been a terrific meeting. So if any of the, I think 2 of the main speakers have gone now. I know Ian had to go and John's gone. I don't know, Margaret, if you want to come back and say anything, or if anybody else, any of the campaigners, Felicity, Greg, or anybody else, would just like to sum a few things up before we finish. There we are.
That's the Chester one.
That's the Chester one. Okay.
Can I just say something, Frank?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, just obviously fantastic meeting. Can I just following on about Felicity saying about all these fantastic posters and all the rest of it. And I know you, Felicity, you've done a call out for anyone who's good with social media. I think it's key in terms of we've got to target these Tory MPs, and I'm if you can find someone who's really good at using Facebook and Instagram and all of those things, they can target directly at those seats. So you can produce a letter. People keep moving around the screen, you're down there, Felicity. So people can produce a letter to say, take this to your MP, talk to them about it. And believe you me, if MPs get 50, 100 letters all about the same issue, they absolutely do sit up and take notice of it. So I think if there's anyone on the call who's good with social media who can get in touch to with the campaign to help kind of start targeting those messages, I think it's an incredibly effective way. It's also a lot cheaper than print media. I mean, it's brilliant you've done all the print media because that's really important sort of in our area. But, you know, to get national reach and particularly to get targeted messages into those Tory marginal seats, you know, social media is just such a fantastic opportunity to do that. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much for that, Margaret. That's a really good idea. I'm sure we can do that. I'm sure there'll be somebody in the campaign who'll be able to do that. That's really terrific. Okay, now Felicity, do you want to say anything else, Leslie?
Can I say one other thing? Had
Yeah.
I not been doing the organising part of this, I would have been talking about what's happening with maternity. And I'm asking Margaret particularly, will you see, I've read the white paper, I've read it in detail. I can't find a reference to maternity. Will you have a look and see what's there in terms of maternity? The Women's Hospital has had to close temporarily part of its services because of staff shortages. We've had the Ockenden report, we've had the crisis in the Jessup wing in Sheffield. It's a rolling crisis in maternity, and I wish I had time to be talking about it. So, you know, next time I'm not going to talk about the organisation, I'm going to talk about what's happening in maternity, but I just wanted to throw that in before we finish.
Thanks very much, Leslie.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, everybody. Well, I think we'll call the meeting to a close. It's been absolutely terrific. Some great speakers, very inspiring and very practical, because that's what it's about. It's about being practical and taking this forward and doing whatever we can. It doesn't matter how little it is. Everybody can do something, and it's very important. So thanks again for coming. And just in case anybody doesn't know, and you might be interested, England are winning 1-0. Okay, let's get important things sorted out. Right, okay. See you on the streets, comrades. Good night, everybody, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Don't forget to look up Jess on Bed.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm going to stop recording.